Welcome, everyone. It's my great pleasure to see so many attendees signed up for our webinar today. With me today is my colleague, Luis Rodriguez. Luis is one of our most experienced client directors and is in charge of several of our large global clients. And my name is Lars Diemer. I'm the CEO of Agnisho. I'm responsible for the overall strategy as well as executing it together with the entire Agnisho team. Like some of you may know, Agnisho is a digital communications technology company. We are focused entirely on the life science industry, and we do solutions such as closed-loop marketing, multi-channel communication, and customer journey digitization. And of course, you can find much more details on agnisho.com. In today's webinar, we'll explore one of the key challenges in life science and therefore an important strategic area for Agnisho. How do we optimize the engagement with doctors and nurses? Just before we dive into that subject, though, I'd like to share a few practical details as well. It's meant to be an interactive webinar, and you can use the chat box on your right-hand side of the screen to answer any questions you'd like us to answer. We'll also try and fire off a poll question and dive into those answers that you have given along the way. And finally, if you have any additional questions, there'll also be time for a Q&A session towards the end. Now, in addition to us being online together right now, a number of attendees will listen in at a later point in time. And this is a perfect example of the flexibility everyone likes to have with regards to the choice of communication channel, the choice of how and when to learn. We see this trend for all stakeholders in the life science industry. Now, along the webinar, you'll hear us use the term virtual engagements. And this is to emphasize that these can be either webinars like today, or it can be two persons in a close dialogue, but remotely located, or it can maybe be a small group speaking with one another. It could also be self-guided engagements where the recipient views and interacts with content as and when they prefer to do so. But we also use the term virtual engagements to signal that not only does it comprise the above-mentioned, the aforementioned ways of engaging remotely, but that we at Agnisho have also developed some cool technology to unfold the benefits of this new trend. So first, let's have a look at the context within which we operate in the life science industry. I'm sure you're all familiar with it, but we have made a graph on the next slide that shows how this all fits together from a technological point of view. Now, I'm sure that many of you have invested in CRM systems, and you typically use these for the core customer data and for measuring sales force efficiency. But often the CRM system is not really an active part of the actual customer engagement. This means you'll have field reps, you'll have MSLs asking themselves, what is really the benefit of the CRM system to me when it comes to my engagement with doctors and nurses, for example? Likewise, some of you have invested in marketing automation for the ongoing electronic communication into the market. And this has proven very useful for many of you for the broad information sharing as well as for sort of initial engagement. But to this day, it still remains rather impersonal. However, many life science companies lack the ability to join their digital investments with the more personal engagements that your employees have with doctors and nurses. And this so-called moment of truth, where you sort of engage individually or in small groups, is where you find out if your key messages are understood and agreed upon. It's where you find out if your content has a positive return on investment. And it's also where you see the first indicators of whether your commercial and educational efforts actually meet their objectives in the marketplace. So to close these gaps of getting your message across and improve your ROI and improve that moment of truth, and to be empowered to do it all digitally, this is exactly why we have developed the Rainmaker technology a few years ago. And very recently, we launched a much improved channel to Rainmaker called Rainmaker Remote. And this was to allow digital engagement such as remote calls and webinars and self-guided detailing. And in Agnitio's customer base, this channel happens to be the fastest growing channel of all of them. So we're delighted to share with you today some of the information on this particular channel. Before we dive into it, though, I'd like to share with you a poll question. The poll questions are: what are the reasons for your interest in virtual engagement? You can select either expanded reach, to service customers better, to include medical or product specialists in more meetings, to strengthen your digital capabilities, or indeed to process or cost optimize. So let's have a look at the replies here. Okay, so the vast majority of you, this is really interesting, the vast majority of you basically say expanded reach is our #1 priority when it comes to virtual engagement, and it's followed by the ability to, with flexibility and content on demand, to service your customers better. So that's really quite interesting. It's topics that we have come across before as we developed the strategy here, and I think also Louis, when I hand over to him in a moment, will be able to actually dive into it in a little bit more details. So with that, Louis, I'd like to hand over to you.
Thank you, Lars, and thank you very much for the introduction here and this very interesting poll. Just looking here from the top answers, there's of course that ongoing need to, of course, cover more with less, to expand our reach, cover more people, new audiences, and with increasingly less resources, as we have seen in the previous years, a trend of decreasing sales force or decreasing elements for communication. So I will certainly touch on that, and as well as here on the secondary topics on how do we become more flexible, how do we strengthen our digital capabilities. To make this a bit more practical, and perhaps for a more down-to-earth view of a virtual engagement, I would like to set as a basis the view of the customer. For today, I would like to have the example of Dr. Jane Hansen, and I hope that just for today only, I will pretend to be Dr. Jane for part of this demo, and we'll see what are her needs in terms of communication and how are they being met by a certain company. In this case, it will be Agnitio pitching a new product called Zenadril for migraine, and we'll see what are the opportunities to have a relevant conversation when Dr. Jane needs it. So let's get started with a normal introduction of a new product to Dr. Jane. She is a neurologist in a major hospital chain, and a big bulk of her time is spent on patients with migraine. And on one of her hospital staff meetings, she is notified that the local payers and the hospital administration have approved the coverage of a new drug for migraine. This new drug has shown to be very promising in clinical trials and be very cost effective, so they are advising all of the hospital staff to prescribe it. Dr. Jane has a busy day, so the next day on the way home, she has a quick glance at her phone and she Googles this Zenadril drug. She reads some headlines. She has an idea of why is it different from the current drugs that she is prescribing. But of course, she's not ready to prescribe it yet until she knows fully what it could do to her patients. A few days later, a sales rep from Agnitio comes and introduces Zenadril to the entire hospital staff. He comes with an e-detailer, a very nice interactive presentation, and he invites all of the doctors for a congress that will be taking place 2 months from then. Of course, 2 months is a long time to be using a product. So of course they are hoping that with this new material that they have shared, the doctors feel confident enough to start prescribing even before the Congress. Lo and behold, 1 week later, a patient comes in and Dr. Jane decides to prescribe Xanadril. 3 days later, that patient comes back saying that they do feel a lot better, the migraine has gone away, but they have some unexpected side effects. Of course, as a physician that has just prescribed a new drug, you immediately launch into panic mode, looking for more information as to what could have happened, or if there's something else that you should know, such as how does it interact with other drugs, or how does it interact with a specific ethnicity or graphical conditions. So this is where we'll take off, and we'll see what are the opportunities from a content perspective and from a communication perspective to address these touch points that we have covered with Dr. Jane. So let's see the content customer journey. What are the actual pieces of content or messages that we're putting in front of the doctor? We know that a sales rep visited and gave the general presentation. The sales rep sent a few emails on Congress invite and a scientific paper, which comes in a PDF format. And as the need to know more about the side effects grew, the hospital has requested that an MSL or someone from the pharmaceutical company presents to this very topic to a few attendees. And Dr. Jane has also received an invite for this virtual visit. They will receive some new material. After all this communication, they have some positive feedback to provide to their peers in the Congress. And if they see some digital content on site via an e-detailer, a face-to-face rep, of course, we will also be able to learn from that interaction. And it doesn't matter which one of these touch points we use, we're always able to gather the data and learn as to what's creating an impact and what's not. So with that storyline, I'm going to jump out of PowerPoint and we'll have a look at the actual solution. As I mentioned, for these next moments, I will pretend to be Dr. Jane. I'm going to go to my inbox as Dr. Jane. Here, I use as Jane Gmail on my day-to-day. And as we had mentioned before, I've already met with the sales rep. He's told me about the product, and he has sent me some initial information. Here I can see that he sent me indeed a full study. I can download that file. And here is a quick introduction to the drug that I have just learned about. I can see that they have also sent me the invitation to the symposium, to this Congress. I can even choose a topic that I would like to hear more, or that I would like them to talk about during that symposium. So if I click on that, I know that they have heard my answer, and most likely I will hear about this topic. So now they said that they will send me an invitation so that I can hear from an expert about the side effects. And lo and behold, here is the remote call invitation. It says that I have been invited to join a session, so let's have a look at that. Yes, I would like to save it in my calendar. And here's telling me, dear Dr. Jane, please click here to enter the call. Now I am waiting for my call to begin. Interesting to note, I didn't have to install anything. It's opening here in the same browser. It was just one click away. So now I'm just waiting for the MSL to start the presentation. And so the presentation begins. I'm going to make a pause here, and I'm going to change my hat and show you what's happening in the backstage, what's happening from the MSL perspective. I'm going to make this window a little smaller, so please bear with me. You will see that the content is adapting according to the size of the screen. And on the right-hand side, and this new window that I've opened, this is reflecting my iPad. Going to make it a little smaller so you can see it side by side. So on the iPad, I am the presenter of this call that I'm running. And if I move something on the iPad here on the right, we will see that it actually moves something on the recipient side. It doesn't look exactly the same because I'm not screen sharing. I'm not showing exactly what's on my screen, but I'm actually broadcasting a dynamic presentation. So that gives us some flexibility to add more interaction, both with the device and screen that they're using, but also to allow them to interact with the content. Here as a doctor, I could start the video, or if there's a poll running, you can see on the left-hand side that I can answer some of the questions. I can interact with the content. And since this was an invitation or a link sent to me personally in my email, we are tracking those answers, and we are keeping track of what is it that I'm seeing on the screen. When I look back here at the MSL, we will notice that I have a few more options. If I open that menu at the top, I can see that I have a chat section, but also I can see some users. And I can see that I'm running this call with 3 more people. So it's not just a one-to-one forced communication tool, but I can actually run a rather large audience from my iPad with my entire digital library. Here I can see that 2 of my attendees are not here, but 2 of them are. And if I click on those, I can actually see the answers that they have been giving to the questions I post on the screen. So this helps me get that immediate feedback directly from my audience. Also, you will notice that I have here at the bottom all of the slides from this very presentation that I'm looking at right now, and I can easily swap between them just by clicking there at the bottom. But also, I can switch to a completely different presentation without the audience looking at all of the changes that I'm making. So in here, I have selected this study 1 PDF, and I'm jumping to the very last slide. Are you sure you want to switch? Yes. So when we look at this from the audience perspective, they're looking at very specific messages from a multitude of options. They're only looking at whatever message is really relevant to them at the moment. And that's what the virtual calls have shown to be one of the major value propositions, that we don't have to be limited to the flow of our content or to the physical restriction of having to sort out through content. We can very easily navigate through an entire library from a presenter perspective. So here, continuing with the story, I'm an MSL presenting much more in-depth content for my audience. And they thought it was great, and they would like to have this presentation. So I'm just gonna go ahead and share it with them. I simply double tap, click on that share button. I can choose which chapters or slides I would like to share with them. And since I've already selected their contact information before, it's already there. So out it goes. Now, let's go back to Dr. Jane. Dr. Jane here has been visited by a rep. She has gone through the presentation, and the material that she requested, it's already here. Now, this is no longer an attachment that she can just download as a simple PDF, but if she clicks on that link, she will have access to that dynamic presentation. So this is where we start also reusing our dynamic material. So not only did I attend a virtual call with many of my peers that had the same doubt, but also I get to have this material for my own and use it on my own time. And when we think of the multiple touch points that we've had so far, the email, the face-to-face call, the virtual call, and this dynamic microsite that we call, in the background, all of my data is being captured, and they know my preferences, and they know which material I have seen. So at my next interaction, it's very likely that I will get a different message or something that they know that I'm interested in. And that's part of the integrated multi-channel goal that we're all trying to achieve. Thinking back of that poll that we ran at the beginning, we know that one, we wanted to increase reach, so we knew how to do that with the virtual engagement. We no longer have the restriction of being face-to-face only in one office, but we can do one-to-many presentation. And secondly, how do we create that? How do we strengthen our digital ecosystem, whether it's with our CRM, other channels, our websites, and our e-detailing and multi-channel activities? This is how we bring it all together. And I hope that you have enjoyed this quick arc of a story with Dr. Jane. So without further ado, I'd like to, I guess, jump back to you, Lars, and perhaps hear from our audience some of their questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Luis. And thank you for the walkthrough. It's always interesting to do live demonstrations while being online. I think it went really well. In the meantime, we have a couple of questions that have come in. A few of them are sort of very specific, but there are also some that I think have a high degree of relevance for most of the audience. One of them is, and I'll just read out here, how do you connect your data from Rainmaker into your CRM solution, if you do that as a niche? Can you answer that one,
Yes.
Luis?
Yeah, so let me jump back a slide, I guess, to make it a bit easier to illustrate. So what we wanted to show here is that all of our channels are connected to our data warehouse. So we are gathering the information in a central place. And with our backend system, we are able to create an integration to a CRM. And this is really what we do with most of our customers. That we have data exchange between their CRM and their contact list and customer data and the interaction that they're creating in our system. And this is going either one way or two ways. So we can actually match all of the internal information that we have available with our customers with whatever they are creating in the different channels. So the integration, of course, it runs invisible. It is a customized setup. But whatever we can exchange, there's really no limit. We can always have a technical connection of some kind.
Okay, thanks. Then there's another one. I'm going to try and present it in a short manner. It says something about, how is Rainmaker Remote, basically any different from any other webinar solution, and then a number of different sort of webinar solutions is mentioned.
Okay, we do get this question fairly often. So I guess we can look at it in two ways. Number one is the content that we're showing. How is it different from content being shown in other webinar solutions? And secondly, the experience and the look and feel of the interaction. From the content perspective, we are dealing here with sensitive material. So content that has to go through an approval process within our internal medical departments and of course with the local authorities. So this content is not something that is just laying around in a USB stick or in sales reps' computers. This is controlled, in this case, with our platform, so that it has very precise distribution and that it arrives to the right audience. So having that access to the content only happens through a solution like this. Secondly, on the technology side, as you may have noticed at the beginning, there was no installation of any software whatsoever. This was running on web entirely. So that really increases the ease of the doctors to actually connect and use this solution. And on the flip side, we're also creating a lot of data from the audience. Unlike this webinar that we're running here today, of course, we don't know exactly how our audience is interacting with the presentation. But if it was a virtual call like the one I ran today with Rainmaker, we would know what they're clicking on, what answers they're giving, what slides are they clicking on, or if they have closed the window. So being able to learn from the interaction as well as facilitate the delivery.
Okay, thanks. So with the few minutes left, I will just try my luck with one of the more specific questions that have come in. There's one person here asking, typically, what time of day do you find your clients are engaging with the HCPs? And is there a way of finding out? I might add, using Rainmaker.
Yes. So we are capturing the data of the call and the interaction in real time. So when it comes to the virtual call, of course, we know exactly the time of the call. We know if depending on the tags that we have, the geography of it. And when it comes to the content that we shared that is on their own time, we also have a timestamp. So if they're opening the shared content at midnight, we'll be able to capture that.
Okay. And so eventually, over time, you would be able to make predictions, for example, on what is the most efficient deployment of the various different channels that you use.
Absolutely, because we can always look at the comparison between the planned calls, how many invites have gone, and whether or not people attended. So we'll have a success rate on the time of the day, on the type of content, on the number of attendees, and so forth. So that all of that information is in our data warehouse, ready to be used.
Yeah. Okay, so one final question here is, it's also one of the more specific ones. Typically, it looks as if someone is using Salesforce as a CRM solution, basically asking if Rainmaker will engage with Salesforce.
Yes, and Salesforce is one of our most common integrations. We do integrate with most of the major CRMs, and even more than one CRM with the same company. And we can do it at different degrees, either with a direct integration with Salesforce, or even through a web service if we need some sort of data management and privacy exchange.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. So we're coming up to the end of the webinar here. If you'd like to know more about Rainmaker or maybe about virtual engagement specifically, please do get in touch. And then now, when we close this webinar, if you have any additional questions, please do reach out. We'd also like to know from the follow-on questions you'll receive in a moment if you have any other sort of future areas of interest that we can cover. And then what's left to say is just thank you very much for everyone attending, and do get in touch if we can answer any more questions. Thank you very much, everyone. Bye.